Okay, welcome back. We're on page 795 talking about the reasons for why you're doing a backup. And a lot of people just look at backups kind of in the wrong way of thinking. Yes, they're great for like if there's a failure, but to tell you honest to God truth, that's probably not the number one use for doing restore operation. I'm not going to say backups anymore because again, backups have no value. It's the restore that has value. I know it's a little kitschy, but just bear with me. So, accidents. Somebody deleted a file by accident, or they copied over an old file on top of a new file. That is probably your number one need to do a restore. Because that happens once a week, not once a year when you have a disk failure, okay? So yeah, disk failures, but then archival requirements. Maybe you have to have some way of keeping track. Maybe there's a legal requirement that says you need to keep all these drafts or something. I don't know. And so you need backups for that reason. Okay, but it's really accident by authorized users, people being dumb. Oops, I can't find my file. What happened? I don't know. Where is it? I don't know. And so you basically have to go find it and restore it. Okay, because users are dumb. All they know is they can't find it anymore. They don't have a clue where it was to begin with. You're going to have to go find it. So maybe you have 3 different customers for kind of each one of these things. Like you're a customer of the backup and restore system, so you want to fix it so it's easy for you to do. Users, they're a customer, and maybe lawyers are a customer, right, of this policy of how you're doing things. So let's talk about accidents. So they talk about this self-service option. If the person knows where the file was, which is asking an awful lot, then there are some interesting, cool techniques where they can restore the thing on their own. Okay, here we go. So this thing used to be called previous versions or shadow copy, or now it's kind of gone to file history, and even then file history is kind of lost out of favor. I can remember a television commercial back in the Windows 2000 days where they were all gathered around this tech talking about how they can save the company money by having self-service restore of files. Television commercial. Anyway, it uses this thing called volume shadow copy. The technical reasons aren't really relevant. So at home, if you're using Windows 10, you had this opportunity to have this thing called file history. If you had 2 hard drives in your machine, okay, you could pick a folder or 2 and have that replicated over here. So whenever you made a change, it made change here, but it doesn't just replicate, it keeps the old one. So at home, you could say, oh, I didn't mean to overwrite that file. I want it back from the one I had from a week ago. Now, that's not the same as the recycle bin, right? Recycle bin is if you deleted it, you could get it back. But if you overwrote it with another version, the recycle bin's not going to help you at all. That's what file history was for. By the way, in Windows 11, for reasons that I can't even imagine, they kind of don't, it's not in favor anymore. You can turn it on, but it's clumsy. They took away a lot of the good features from it. I think what they want you to do is to use OneDrive or some other cloud-based service for doing this rather than doing this on your own machine. That's just a guess. Okay, so at home, you have this thing called file history, but on the server, it's not called that. It's something else. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to computer management. So I'm going to go here to computer management. I'm going to go to the shared folders, and I'm going to do a right click and say all task and configure shadow copies. So right now I've got this volume for my C drive, and it is currently not set. But I'm going to set it on I typically would not turn on shadow copies on the C drive because in a typical environment, C drive is just the operating system. No user files go there in a typical real world scenario. But on the D drive, if the D drive was like a RAID 5 specifically designed to hold storage from users, well then I would go here and I would enable this thing. And when you enable it, it says, hey man, we're getting ready to do this. Default settings are not appropriate for having high blah, 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 blah. And so I say yes. The thing here is settings will tell you how much space is being used. For example, I'm telling it up to this amount, and then further what the schedule would be. The schedule typically is twice a day Monday through Friday, but not Saturday and Sunday. That's what the schedule typically is. And so what it's doing, it's now storing stuff. So if I was to go in and make a change to a file, I don't have anything right this very second, but let me just pretend. Okay, so I'm going to go in through the network side of this rather than, so I'm going to go to my, how about my engineering one guy? And so I could go in here and do a right click and go to properties, and it would have this thing called previous versions. And this would have all of the things that have changed. I could go back and say, aha, I want that particular file or this particular folder. That's how that works. It works fairly well. And if you could teach your users on how to do this, they'd be probably okay with it. Now, not every user, I can imagine, you know, like I deleted a file and I can't find it. I know it's somewhere in this folder called mechanical properties. Most likely, they're not going to be able to tell you that, and you're going to have to go over there and do this for them. But even so, I don't have to, you know, pull out my tape deck. I can just do it here. Now, this is not perfect, and there's a limit on the number of shadow copies you can have on a folder, and if there's an awful lot of activity in this particular folder, well then, how far back you can go is probably like 3 or 4 days. If the activity on this drive is pretty low, maybe you can go back a couple of months, right? So you can't really predict in advance how far back you can get because you don't really know the activity on the drive. Okay, is that how that works? Good. Okay. You know, remember how we did a snapshot on our virtual machine? You can do snapshots on SAN and NAS boxes. Very cool way of doing a backup. I'm getting ready to do something kind of funky. I just did snapshot, bing, and then you move on. Those are excellent, and they're a lot faster than using tape. However, they're used for that accidental deletion thing, okay? Certainly not for a disk failure, okay, or lightning strike, right? That's not going to help me at all, right? Okay. Which is, by the way, this version, you know, file history was an evolution of this. They said, you don't have to do shadow copies for the entire drive. You could just pick out 1 or 2 folders that you want to do shadow copies on, okay? Not here. When you turn this thing on, it's for the entire drive, all disk activity, okay? Well, that's not exactly true. There are certain filters in there that won't do that. Oddly enough, one of them is a PST file. Kind of weird. Anyway, back to the story. Okay, so hardware failures. So if I have a single drive failure and I'm in a RAID 5, I'm okay, right? That kind of thing. On a PC, what's the response time for repair? I mean, if I had a hard drive go out, do you just tell the poor guy sitting at the desk, well, we'll get to you next Tuesday, and just, you know, once you just take a vacation break or something, we'll come back? Do I give them another PC? Do I swap out their hard drive? How long does it take to do a restore? That kind of stuff. Who is responsible for doing the backups? I mean, if you had high rollers, you might want to have those guys use folder redirection so that you, the IT department, are doing the backups for them. Okay, just saying. But everybody? Ooh, no. I don't want to have folder redirection for the My Documents folder. For every person in the organization, I don't have enough storage for that. If we decided to go that way, I would buy a separate server just for that and have, I'm sorry, this is how much storage we got, and you're gonna have to duke it out among yourselves on why we're running out of space. I would basically say, I'm sorry, I'm out of here, dude. You can put all your stuff wherever you want it, but no one can have more than whatever the magic number is. So everyone is limited to their tiny piece. So I'm making this up. Everyone gets a half a terabyte, and that's it. You know, if somebody comes, well, I need more. Well, okay, maybe that one person you could tweak a little bit. But that's how it would have to be done, because otherwise they'll just consume the entire thing. Okay. So archival purposes. Typically, you would archive a full backup because I only need one tape to do an archive, right? Okay. I don't want to have an archive being, well, it's this tape and that one, you know, just full backups. Typically, they're read-only, right? Because from an archival perspective, particularly in a court case scenario, you don't ever want to mount a tape read-write because someone could say that you went in and altered things and tampered with it. stored separately somewhere, right? So here's a weird one. Let's say, for example, I decided, well, I'm going to use a DVD-R for my archival purposes. Great. And so 5 years have gone by, maybe 10. Does anyone still have a machine that can read that thing? Okay, tape decks. So I got an old tape that from archived out 10 years ago, and I've swapped the tape deck out 3 times since then. Who the heck is going to be able to read that tape? Yeah, you're going to have to keep those burners or keep those tape decks. You can't ever throw them away because you may need them for archival. Anyway, keeping the old tech, that's kind of important. Okay, so they talk about exercising a drill, practicing purpose. I mentioned that automated fire drill where they, I thought it was kind of silly, but randomly pick a server and a file and telling the service provider, restore this file for me and see how long it takes. That's pretty dumb. Corporate guidelines on page 799. Consult the lawyers, obviously. The data retention rules could be different, particularly if you're under investigation. And again, how would you even know if your company was served a subpoena? You're in the IT department. How would you even know unless you just overheard it at the water cooler? Right? Somebody has to say, oh, our data retention policy that's current in effect is not going to cut it now because we need to permanently store this type of information from now on until we tell you otherwise. Okay. All right. Data recovery, SLA, service level agreement. Again, there's probably not much of a need for the backup part of an SLA, but it's the restore part. How far back? I need 2 months worth of stuff? If I said 4 months, that means the price is going to go up, isn't it? Right? Okay, just saying. What type of restore is the granularity, the retention? So, for example, retrieve a file within 4 hours or within a business day? Or if a disk failed, how long would it take for you to do a restore? That kind of stuff. The schedule, page 801. Backups are kind of resource intensive because they're probably consuming a lot of disks activity plus network activity, most likely network. So believe it or not, a lot of backup systems will allow you to tone down the effort. In other words, deliberately have lower scheduled priority and deliberately try not to saturate the network if you were doing it in the middle of the day. Again, the speed of the backup is not important. In the middle of the night, I probably wouldn't tweak it. I'd probably leave it at the defaults. So if you were backing up in the peak times, you probably need to slow the backup down. Okay. Tower of Hanoi, remember that's... you can see if you Google that, you'll see a pretty cool thing. Basically, you're talking about, a larger tape followed by a smaller tape followed by a smaller tape. Basically, it's just another representation of this. Okay, time and capacity, page 807. So one of the things we needed was let's say I wanted to back up every hour, okay? But my backup takes 2 hours to happen. That's not going to work, is it? So the minimum amount of time between backups is the time it takes to do a backup. That kind of makes sense. Okay, good. And backups, if humanly possible, should fit on one media. Now, we had one of those robot tape drives with a little arm came out, put a tape drive in, and then when it got full, it went, stuck it out, grabbed another one. Those things never worked. I mean, that was the most common reason we'd get in on Monday and the tape drive and the backup failed during the middle of the night. It's because the dang tape robot got stuck. We had 2 identical units because we never bought just one of anything, right? And it didn't matter. Those things were painful. So if possible, it would be really, really cool if everything could fit on a single drive or media or something. I know that's not possible, but it's a good thing to talk about. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark.